This is the Guided Podcast, an interview with the fly fishing industry's top guides and brand ambassadors. On this podcast, we cover topics such as the guiding lifestyle, conservation, different fisheries globally, and gear and technology to improve your game. I'm your show host, Greg Keenan. Before we begin today's show, let's thank our sponsors. Scientific Anglers is the leader in producing the world's best fly lines for over 75 years. Scientific Anglers have set new industry standards with their SA Amplitude family of fly lines, both in technology and performance. See the difference for yourself today at scientificanglers.com. Show your show support and follow us on Instagram at Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. Now let's begin. Welcome to Guided. Today our guest is Landon Mayer. Landon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it, and looking forward to chatting with you here.
Yeah, this is quite an honor again. Yeah, you're one of the few that have been back in less than a year, so that's awesome. But that speaks good.
Thanks for having me.
That speaks good things. Landon, you know what? For those that don't know, tell us a bit about yourself. I know you're a well-known within the industry and a well-known angler, so tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, I reside with my wife, Michelle, and our kiddos in Florissant, Colorado, and guide full-time, enjoy teaching at shows, seminars, giving back with articles and books and videos as well, instructional videos. Those are all found on the website, landonmayerflyfishing.com, and just thankful every day to have an opportunity to talk fishing, live fishing, and help get back to anglers.
Well, you're definitely doing that. Well, I know you're a guide in Colorado, and I want to touch base and talk about what type of guiding you do, the types of waters that you guide in, and your guiding area. So with that said, let us know.
You bet. Yeah. So a lot of the guiding that we do is the upper region of the South Platte River, which my favorite location is referred to as South Park. It's 190 miles in circumference. Within 190 miles, we have the tailwater, the Dream Stream, 3 Stillwaters, Antero, Spinney, 11-mile reservoir, the headwaters of the South Platte, the Middle and the South Fork. And with those 3 Stillwaters and over 27 miles of public land to fish, it's incredible just how much diversity there is, but also the opportunity to grow and learn more as an angler. We also do deckers. We have permits on the Blue. We just acquired some great permits and opportunities at Santa Maria Ranch this year, which is the Middle Fork of the South Platte. So we love it. It's just a giant playground, and again, a chance to kind of move around and see the different sites.
That's awesome, man. So when you're there, what's your primary target out of species? Like, because it's so diverse, like that whole area. Obviously, trout's primary, but what type of species of trout?
Yeah, you bet. So we have a very cool strain of wild browns in Spinney and also 11-mile reservoir. Those are truly the gems of the South Platte. Some of these fish are genetically strong and haven't been stocked in areas dating back to the early 70s. We also have rainbows, cutbows, Snake River cutthroats. And just to mix it up, we also have pike, we have carp, and some great opportunities to find those fish on the edge of some of the still waters. But we just love the diversity, again, in the fisheries and also the species alike, where you can literally in one day, you could be on the river being a tailwater, you could be on the still water in the afternoon, and you could literally end your day at one of the headwaters or the forks of the headwaters. So hitting 3 different locations, 3 different disciplines, and 3 different unique ways to fish it for multiple species really does just help you advance as an angler. It's pretty cool.
You know, Landon, I'm looking at this going, you have such a big area that you're kind of like fishing and whatnot. There must be some conservation issues attached to that area. Is there anything that we can touch base on today that is effective or something that you would like to talk about that, you know, anglers should be aware of that are regarding your fishing area?
Absolutely. It starts with, I think an important thing is cleanups. And we have some awesome cleanups in the South Platte. The one that I personally work with Brandon Kramer on and the 11-mile state parks is called Clean the Dream. And we're going to do that again this year in August. Everybody gets together, collects trash. We have a barbecue. You can win prizes. It's just a great gathering, a way to really protect and give back to the resource. And I personally think the most important topic to cover is really protecting a lot of our spawning trout within South Park. And I would say most importantly, our wild brown trout, knowing that they genetically and naturally reproduce, that we have fish that can exceed 30 inches. In addition to awareness signs that we're trying to get the state to allow us to put up, or we make it aware to anglers by red signs that, hey, this is a known spawning area, or there's actively spawning trout, please leave the fish behind this sign alone. I think the biggest impact, which would really help all the fisheries out, is just to boycott or shut the river down for the nighttime situations. Not all year, but if you did that in October, just 1 month alone, no night fishing, all those large dominant female and male brown trout could naturally reproduce with kokanee salmon, have a wealth of natural reproduction, wild trout in the future, and leaving the fish stress-free in the evening also produces more results for those fish to be active and feeding during the daytime hours. So that's really what we're striving and pushing for. We're really trying to encourage anglers to, in the fall bite, leave the fish alone, let them naturally reproduce. Do the nighttime fishing during the summer when temperatures are warm at night and those fish are known to look up for hoppers and mice and, floating streamer scenarios. All that can really work, but I think that fall is really important to leave them be and let the nocturnal predators do what they do.
Yeah, I agree with that. Would you say there's anything else that anglers can do? I mean, I guess if if you hook into one, obviously not stress it out, all that sort of stuff. But is there anything else that we can think of?
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Just, avoiding shallow gravel, 2 to 3 inch cobblestone in areas where we know trout spawn. Mm-hmm. That's very important. If you're above or below those zones, if the trout are spooked and they move to the lowest section of that shallow gravel bar and they hold in a deep run, still also leave those fish alone. And, things I like to teach my clients, look for deep water where trout aren't spawning. Try to target opposite species of the species that's spawning at that time. Like during the fall, great opportunities for rainbows, cutthroats, and cutbows. And then return during the spring, great opportunities for large browns and some of the other species that move in. And really, if you do find a fish that you've hooked, and let's say it's a female, for example, if you pick it up and she's dropping eggs, just return her to the water immediately. Try to prevent holding the fish up for photographs. And one thing I've been doing lately as well is wearing nitrile gloves, which help during the cold, help to keep sun off your hands. But the real advantage is it doesn't take that mucus membrane off the trout's body. So it really is helpful and healthy for the fish and ensures a proper release.
I totally agree with that. And, like being up here in Canada, we have a Stillwater season that's pretty good. And we have quite a few females that are spawning and whatnot, and that works for us as well. As soon as you get a spawner, you bring her in, just let her go. You know what I mean? It just I think it works the same. I mean, I know we've all at one point brought one in and some eggs are in your boat and stuff. Just immediately just put the fish back. There's just no point at that point in keeping it. I agree with that. So
exactly.
You mentioned something in there about 30-inch fish. And I'm sure a few listeners can pick that up. So can you give us some tips on how you're catching 30-inch fish, Landon?
Yeah, it was one of the biggest things I've found lately, is targeting. Timing's everything in fly fishing, right? And we learn that as we spend time on the water, pay our dues, and from what we learn with other anglers and our teachings over the years. But knowing that timing is everything, I really do focus on pre and post spawn. And lately it's been the post spawn bite that's the most effective, where the fish are done spawning or the fish are looking and migrating for food. It, could be the shoulder season where it's not even spring or fall. You're targeting summer, you're targeting winter. And a lot of these large trout are targeting their food supply. And while large trout are lazy by nature, I think it's important for people to realize they're also opportunistic. So if the good example of that is if the crayfish are molting or migrating, concentrate on using that as a food supply, concentrate on that season in late summer, early fall, knowing a lot of the trout will focus on that. Ice off is a great time for still waters where fish are moving to the edge. They don't have to be spawning. We're looking for temperatures, anything over 50 degrees. And that's when a lot of the fish are cruising the edges and actually feeding and looking for the next meal. And then targeting when the season's over, when fish are done spawning, a lot of those fish are depleted of size and nutrients. Then you can really target those fish and know they're hungry. And to be honest, that can be some of your best shots at larger trout. And I always find it as remarkable as it is, it's incredible how large trout heal up. If they're spawning, they're scraped up, they have bruises, bite marks, they're battling other fish. a month after their spawning season's over, a lot of these fish start to put weight back on. They start to heal up. They look beautiful again. Awesome markings, and that way you're leaving the health with the fish as well.
Yeah, I know we were talking before, and like you said, the fish they cruise those shallows and whatnot. So talk about the shallows and the underutilization of the shallows, and what equipment or what lines and what your setup is to effectively fish the shallows and put those clients of yours on those big fish during that time.
Absolutely, yeah. And for stillwaters, it's intimidating to begin with. For those who haven't touched on that or really tried to adventure that way, you look at a giant piece of water and you think, man, where do I start? What do I look for? And the shallow water really does supply so many opportunities for food. The biggest thing you have to overcome in shallow water is when to be there. So you're going to time the hatch like damsels when they swim into the shallows, crayfish when they move, water boatmen, all these food supplies found in water that's 2 feet or less. The biggest problem that you'll find in those shallow zones is how do I deliver a fly and how do I not snag bottom? How do I keep the fly moving horizontal like the natural and keep it mid-column? And I think the secret weapon for that is the camo Stillwater line from Scientific Anglers. And the nice thing about the camo line is that it's sinking 1 to 2 inches per second. It's camouflage and coloration through its design. And you're not going to be snagging bottom, and while slowly retrieving to match the movement of a damsel, a water boatman, a scud, or a midge. Just as an example with food supplies, you can cast 40 feet in 2 feet of water where you see the fish breaking and moving, and again, make it appear as a natural with slow movement and know you're not going to snag bottom. And I really do think that works well. Another line I like to use too, let's say you're fishing the drop line where it goes from 2 feet and it drops down to 6 feet or even further. You can use the sonar clear tip line, which is a clear intermediate sinking tip, allowing that portion of the line to start to descend down to the bottom. And again, using stealth where the trout don't detect the fly line, but most importantly, just navigating and managing your depth control it makes all the difference in the world. And it's incredible just how close and similar this is to sight fishing in saltwater when you're dealing with some of these freshwater lakes or reservoirs.
Absolutely. So then for your sonar, let's talk about the sonar setup. Like what type of leaders are you going to add to that? Like, let's just walk it through from fly to like your rod essentially.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a great question. So I keep the leaders relatively short. I'll start at 3 feet, sometimes even cutting back further to 2 feet or 1.5 feet. And I'm a fan, if I'm using larger flies, I'll use 2 pieces of tippet and connect it in the middle with the swivel. That way, if I needed to in the front end or the front piece of tippet that connects to the fly, if I need to go smaller in diameter or size, I can always make that adjustment. And then the biggest thing that I'm doing with that sonar camo line is that I'm making sure when it's moving in shallow water, I'm connecting those flies using a loop knot. I think the loop knots are important because the key when retrieving flies is not always the strip or the retrieve. One of the keys is the pause. Every time you pause with a loop knot, then that really does make that fly or imitation move awkwardly where it's not horizontal. It could endo dip or it could lift up or twist to the side. And that's an indication to the trout that it's injured and it's time to feed.
Landon, do you fish like, and I'm gonna quickly, we're going to get back to like what your rod and all that is, like what weights you're using, but do you fish chironomids ever?
Sure. We do. Yeah. Chironomids we have. Absolutely. Yep. Indicator fishing. We do that. And a lot of times we'll do that in the spring or early morning hours. A good example for me with the chironomid bite is during ice off below indicators, I'll attach my Titan tube midge, which is a chironomid with Umpqua feather merchants. And then I'll also below that, I'll drop my mini leech jig in the regular or radiant series. And that chironomid that's 6 inches or less off of a tag. And then 18 inches below that, I have the mini leech jig. When that's hanging below the indicator and we wait for that big fish chop, every time there's ripples in the water, both of those flies are moving. And most importantly, that anchor fly being the jig is lifting up and down. Absolutely.
Super cool. And again, you know what? The loop knot, super effective.
No, it's so effective.
I was going to say, effective. when I, as a big chironomid fisher, I mean, as soon as I went to that, my catch rate went up drastically when, you know what I mean? You add that loop knot to it.
Oh, so
for those listeners out there, we're in the loop knot for sure. So,
well, somebody asked that the other day in one of my tying classes, and they ask the question, well, why is the loop not effective? I personally think it's like you were saying, when you attach your fly to that being a chironomid, I think it's because the fly is no longer connected directly to the knot. So instead of it lifting and dropping by way of how the monofilament or fluorocarbon is moving, it's literally twisting up and down and moving freely. And I think that freedom of motion is what triggers those fish.
Absolutely. It's more natural, right? I mean, it's natural.
Exactly.
It has movement.
Yep.
Just even the water waves, it's like the current itself that we can't see for sure. So totally agree with that. So
you bet. You bet.
What are you are 5 weight, 6 weight?
Yeah, I use the Super 10s with Winston. I use 3, 4, and 5 weights, which essentially the 10-foot is adding more weight size or more power with the rod. So basically your 3 weight's a 5, a 4's a 6, a 5's a 7. And with that 10-foot, adding a little bit more length, you get more height when you fight trout. You get more power when you're moving it side to side. You get more line control. And then you can go from conventional casting to even single hand space style where you can cut through the wind. So those are my go-to matched with the Bauer RX reels. And I think with the seal ball bearing disc drag and a lot of the power you get from that where you can see them down, matched with the supple tip and the midsection power from the boron blend with Winston, man, it's a home run connection with the sonar line.
I just learned something from you there, so I definitely appreciate that little tidbit. So what other tips do you have for us?
You bet, bud.
What other tips?
Yeah, I think the other thing too is, for the Stillwater, the one thing I've learned is that when you approach it, the key is, I think all the time when you're looking at water, try to find something to identify that's the location that holds trout. So my tip with that is look for structure, look for intercepting points, and look for drop-offs. If you have those 3 or one of those 3, those can all be areas where trout find cover, they find refuge, solitude, but they can also feed. And that I think can really help you on the Stillwater bite, moving from the river scenario as well.
For sure. Now, you're also a fan of the Amplitude MPX, and why is that?
Absolutely. I think the Amplitude line's amazing, not only with the slickness, but MPX and textured series. You get floatability. It moves through the guides with less resistance. The longer taper, the long, thick taper, you can carry line effectively. And then also, a lot of people don't realize with the Amplitude, if you scrape and clean with the pad, every single layer is new slickness. You don't have to apply new moisture, new silicone slickness to it. It's actually inside of the goop. So you scrape to clean and you're ready to rock with essentially a brand new line. It's incredible. And for dry flies, when you're dealing with the shallow water, you'll have subsurface. There's also moments where you have the top water bite where you can do the dry dropper. You'll need to make the cast. You'll need to be able to float in the wind and allow your flies to drift into the shallow water settings. And that's my favorite line for that by far.
You know what? I learned something else here. So if you scrape and clean, do you think that would probably apply to like the saltwater lines as well, wouldn't it?
I believe so, yeah. And that technology is just very helpful because one of the biggest problems that we have with full-time guides or anglers on the water all the time is maintenance, cleaning your lines, making sure they're fresh. And if you know that you can literally get in the boat, scrape the line, you don't even have to do it the night before, and then you're rocking that day with a fresh line that's smooth, that's going through the guides with ease, landing on the water, gives you floatability, get rid of all that grime and dirt. And the more you float that line, the better performance you get, the more fish you'll catch.
And that's that ATS technology as well. So
absolutely.
Landon, let's really quickly before I let you go, let us know what else you got going on.
You bet. Yeah. So I have the new video that came out, Master the Short Game, which is available through Vimeo online. So it's mastertheshortgame.com. Check it out if you haven't seen it. It's 60 minutes. It's awesome. Dries, nymphs, and streamers. It's like a full day guide trip within a video. We shot in Argentina, Tennessee, Colorado, and Pennsylvania. In addition to that, I'm just traveling to the shows. I have the upcoming show this weekend, Pleasanton, California, the fly fishing show. I'll be in Evergreen, Colorado this evening for a Trout Unlimited event. And then I have Fort Worth and Dallas, Texas, and then also the fly fishing Brew Fest, which is in Plano, Texas, which is coming up in March as well. So check out the shows. Some great information and articles coming out. The new book, Sight Fishing for Trout, second edition, and The Hunt for Giant Trout, and just loving being on the water and talking fishing with great people like yourself, man. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, of course, Landon. I'm going to make sure I put all that in the show notes. But if someone wanted to reach out to you regarding guiding or any other things, where would they find you?
You bet. Right at the website, LandonMayerFlyFishing.com. It's got a contact page in the menu bar, questions, guided trips, any information. There's a lot of great informative things there. This podcast, when it goes live, will be on that website as well under events and podcast page.
Awesome, buddy. Appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy and I know you're about to travel, so we are going to let you go. And yeah, thanks for listening to this episode of Guided. Thank you, listeners.
Amen. You bet. I appreciate everybody. I appreciate you. Keep up the good work and check out all the episodes, man. You're crushing it with the podcast. I really appreciate you having me on.
Awesome, Landon. Thanks, buddy.
Bet.
You've been listening to the Guided Podcast, sponsored by Scientific Anglers. If you like this podcast episode, please let us know and leave a review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And remember, subscribe to the Fly Fishing Insider podcast to get even more episodes of both Guided and the Fly Fishing Insider each week. See more at flyfishinginsiderpodcast.com.